Good morning, Ron John.
Good morning, Randy. Hi, I'm just, thanks for joining us today live on this uh, podcast on basically critical role of master data in for SAP IAM. I'll introduce myself. My name is Ranjan Bakshi. I'm the CEO for Prospecta. My background has been basically in data and SAP and a lot in the asset management space. Um, I have also Randy Gibson with me today to help me in this interesting session, and then we'll be joined with Mark and Michael from Accenture, who have a lot of experience in this area. Maybe Randy, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure, thanks, Ron John. Absolutely. I am Randy Gibson. I'm head of solutions based here in North America for Prospecta. 20 plus years in master data, primarily in oil and gas and mining, and really focused on assets, plant maintenance, that area. And now really concentrating as well on master data governance and data quality. So good to be here.
So maybe now let's bring in Mark and Michael to join us and have a good few topics to discuss. Here you go. Hello, Mark. How are you doing? Michael?
Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are. Thanks for having us today, Ron.
Good morning.
Good morning. Mark, maybe if you want to introduce yourself, and then we can pass it on to Michael to introduce, and then we can get on.
Right, sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Mark Pyatt. I'm based in Dallas, Texas. Been with Accenture 6 years. Before that, I spent 18 years with SAP. I'm the Intelligent Asset Management Lead for North America. So nice to meet you.
Thank you.
Good day, all. I'm Michael Otto, based in Minneapolis, Minnesota, Managing Director for our SAP Data and Analytics practice, focusing on data management, data governance.
Beautiful. All right. So today I will try to moderate as much as I can, and I think today I'll try not to say any answers, but have more questions to you guys. That's how we'll address this today. And thanks for joining us, and I'm sure it'll be an interesting session for the wider community, not only in data and assets. And normally assets and data for me has been two very important things in my life, at least in terms of how do we leverage the importance of data in asset management. And now that we call it intelligent asset management, I think data becomes a very key. And when we talk about data in general, obviously we talk about master data, and that is something that comes in. Obviously, we have different kinds of data in assets and in any other domain. And I think maybe I'll start with a very simple question, Mark. And for people who really want to get it from the ground up, what is master data for you in intelligent asset management, and why is it critical so much that people talk about in IAM space? So, and getting your views on that, and then we can probably pass around to. But maybe first I'll probably hear it from you.
Well, master data is critically important to equipment operations, asset management, in running the whole life cycle of the asset. Usually master data within our clients has been kind of mismanaged over the last 25, 30 years. SAP itself, with the IAM solution, it's brand new. It's been re-engineered, it's been significantly expanded. So we find lots of times that our clients don't have governance policies in place, don't have data cleansing policies in place, don't really manage the data, the integrity of the data very well. So it's something that's very critical, because what we're trying to do is help clients move from manual processes and clipboards to digital processes. And so data is the lifeblood that enables that process to actually happen and work. So we actually encourage them. That's one of the first things we start with as a foundation is master data. What are the master data sources? They're going to provide insight on the equipment. I'll let Mike continue that thought.
No, you hit the nail on the head there, Ron John. That master data is a big term, and there are different types of data. And unfortunately, we use the word master data interchangeable to kind of describe a lot of the data, especially that's consumed or used within IAM. So assets, yep, that is a key piece and would be true master data. But then you have the bill of materials that's tied to the asset. And really that's actually, even though every client I've ever gone to says it's master data, that's actually reference data. Because within the bill of material, it consumes the material of master itself, which is then master data. And so there are those pieces where you come in from a governance perspective and go, okay, we can manage and do an MDM process around the master data, but then we're going to have reference data and transactional data and maybe even configuration data. And those all get managed just a little bit differently in the way to go get set up and ongoing and those activities. Setting those up properly, though, and getting those true, and like Mark said, the definition behind them pays big dividends down the road to allow us to get into that leverageability to leverage digital, get into the predictive analytics and all those pieces that we want to get into. And we have lots of data, but how do we get those categorized properly, managed properly, defined properly, to where then we can actually then leverage and get to our end goal?
Now that's really good. And I think maybe Randy, if you want to add something on there, that'll be from your experience in this.
Yeah, just a little bit. Michael and Mark really covered it really well. But people ask me all the time what master data is, and I describe it as being the skeleton. It's actually the basis for everything else that we do. We're always concerned in our transactional data, but the transactions that we do within SAP, the work orders and those type of things, unless we build our master data and we've got it correct, then everything else is going to suffer. So it's the foundation that we build everything on.
Yeah, and sometimes when especially when I went into the asset space, and a lot of time master data was spoken in terms of customer data and other domains, and when you talk about duplicate customers and what impact it has. So maybe Michael, question to you, and you come a lot from different domains of master data. You have a much more wider experience. How do you see information like duplicate equipment data, for example, and the impacts of that in the master data space?
Well, that's the thing, is that when you look at master data, it should be unique. And so, like you alluded to customers, and it can be the same thing on the supplier vendor side. Oftentimes, they're set up to where they're nearly identical, but they were done for a different business reason. Oh, it's because this customer is for this business unit, or only does business with, or this vendor only does business with this plant or location. But then if you try to roll them up and you try to get into any type of spend analytics on supply chain side, any type of reporting on the customer side to see how much from a sales that they're doing, it's hard to get those all rolled up to know that they're all the same entity, and whether they're actually a legal entity their own, or they're held onto by a holding company or a private equity. It's hard to get all those numbers rolled up to see exactly what all your customers are buying or what you're all buying from your supply base. When you get into assets, same thing. A lot of companies have grown up through acquisition, and all of a sudden I might have multiple widgets, motors, pumps, conveyor belts. Hopefully they actually are tied then from an asset perspective to different functional locations where they are physically different. But a Mitsubishi motor is very different than a General Electric motor. And sometimes I don't put those pieces in there and I just have it as a 5 horsepower motor. Well, the preventative maintenance schedule is a little bit different. The components that went into it are a little bit different. I can't just send a crew out to go do the preventative maintenance schedule on a 5 horsepower motor and give them all the spare parts and assemblies for a Mitsubishi one and show up and it's a GE one. I've now spent a lot of labor that I didn't need to go do.
And that also comes to, Mark, when we follow on to that, all this missing information that when we talk about data in terms of quality and enrichment, and just from that question, having manufacturer information missing in IAM is definitely something that I feel that it's quite an important area for maybe your thoughts.
Yeah, that's why important. We going through to clients. That's one of the first questions we ask is where's your master data sources? Which one's primary? Which do you have redundant data sources? And most of the time, clients do. So then we say, okay, we've got to figure out what the primary source of data should be to feed the process, because having multiple sources of data and trying to keep up with it, or having redundant data sources linked into the overall process, as Mike mentioned, which data sources do you load to assist the worker? And that's really what it comes back to. We're trying to improve decision making at the point of work execution, and that can be very confusing. And then when changes are made, we have to update the master data to include all the changes that took place. If there's a complete replacement of an asset, or I pulled out a gasket, put a new gasket in, etc. The history and maintenance on this whole piece of equipment again contributes to the life cycle of the asset view. That's why it's so critically important. We have to get this right, because and it really is the foundation. If we can't get this right, the foundation for going digital doesn't work. And so that's really what's the limiting factor in so many cases. I get into client discussions all the time, and they have a liking what I call the shiny penny. The shiny penny is, I want to go do predictive, or I want to go do digital, or I want to go do analysis, blah blah. And it's like, guys, if you don't have good master data, you can't do any of that stuff. So you've got to really, back them up, help them with the fundamentals. So every project we work on with clients, we are starting with the fundamental basics of finding the master data, linking up to the asset hierarchy, defining and getting rid of redundancies. The other thing it contributes to is errors. You got tons of errors in redundant data sources, and so correcting that and trying to make sure it's tied to a standard definition. The data has been cleaned, adequately put into terminology that people are going to understand. That's critically important. So that's why we use Prospectus tool, because it allows us to do that. And so it helps us automate that process, and then we can easily replicate it. And Mike mentioned, different geographic locations. We want to create a standard hierarchy and a structure that we can share across locations, regardless of the type of data source that's out there. So if it's a different database, we still want to use the same functional capabilities that are defined in EAM, so that we can pull that data. Sometimes you have to do a little extra work to configure it, but for the most part, that helps standardize processes across operations. And that's really critically important, because most of our clients have never done that before. So that's kind of the 1-2 punch that we always have to go through every single client. And I'm frankly actually kind of surprised that we don't see more I'll say data integrity programs and data management capabilities with our clients. They really don't appreciate what's necessary to make it all work. So
Yeah, and true. And because one thing with the customer that previously, and it always comes up, is the hierarchy, right? So the asset hierarchy, and what should be my hierarchy? How many levels it should be? Where should the equipment? Should I have a sub equipment? And the importance of getting that right and the right balance, so that you're not making too flexible for anybody to just do what they want, versus to have, or not making too rigid that they really stop ignoring the hierarchy, and the jobs are not even referring the hierarchies anymore. So I think maybe Randy, you've done a lot on the functional location hierarchy. I know maybe something you may want to.
I have,
Yeah.
but I was sitting here listening to Michael and Mark talking, and really, they've really covered the question really well. But one of the things that as they were talking, I thought about, is the fact that the reason that we need a master data governance solution, and it's so important and would set up with the business rules, is because what's important to Michael and his job may not be important to Randy and his job. And so we don't understand sometimes how what we're doing affects the other areas of our organization. So those business rules then set it up so that when I'm creating data or I'm fixing data, I'm making sure that it's not just for me in EAM, not just for me in plant maintenance, but it's what procurement needs as well. It's what the other areas of the business need. So if we have that master data governance solution, then we're able to create those rules to make sure that we're building good master data, not just for me in plant maintenance, but for all the other areas as well. And I think that's extremely important.
And what happens is we just start creating these silos, right? So, and we say, okay, this is asset master data, this is material master data.
Exactly.
That's always an interesting area. Where does material stay? Does it stay in procurement? Does it stay in maintenance? And especially when it comes to spare parts. And I think I had once a situation where I think the customer wanted to know that my people don't even know where to create an equipment or a spare part, and those kind of very simple things. So not having them linked to the right model or equipment is definitely something we look at all the time. And every time we should not even have new spare part requests, really. When you're doing a job, it should be all there in a bill of material. But what is, maybe Randy, just going back to you, and then maybe I want to also throw that to Mark also, in terms of linking these parts to equipment. What's your, what's your experience been? Has it been consistent, or it's been like,
Uh, linking parts to equipment. Let's be honest, in most places, it very seldom happens. And it's so important to do it because you need to know what parts you need when you go out there. I had a client that I was actually on site with, and they had given all of their planners golf carts. And I thought, well, that's really cool, but what do you need the golf cart for? And he told me that whenever they wrote a work order, the first thing they did was they went out to the location and checked what assets were actually there, because what was in SAP was not correct. It was they had never updated it. And I said, well, when you go out there, you're updating it, right? He said, no, we don't have time to do that. We're just ordering the parts and we're just going on. So our system just gets worse and worse. Those are the kind of things when we talk about doing a root cause analysis on something, we can't do that because the equipment that we actually have in the system is not the equipment that's actually out there and running, or that's actually failing and we're trying to do a root cause analysis on. So there are so many things that will fail simply because we don't have the right asset set at the right location. We have not made those changes. And I ask clients all the time, and they're just, I'd ask them, when you pull that pump out to rebuild it, do you replace it? No, it's the same pump that's been there forever. So our maintenance history on our individual equipment is not correct. We're only getting the maintenance history at the location. What happens with that piece as it goes throughout its life, that pump, we have no idea. So important, so important.
And Mark, do you want to add anything on that in terms of?
Well, I'll go back to your point earlier. I mean, the other thing is that clients don't often, because they don't have standard terminology, they don't know what to use from a hierarchy standpoint. So, what is the taxonomy that's going to actually drive your operations? Your solution supports ISO 14224, 15926, all the different ISO standards that are out there, and that's the first thing they really have to agree on is what standard they're going to use. Then what's going to be the terminology? Then we take them through, discussion on alerts, notifications, descriptions and work orders. We go through that whole process of setting that up, and we use Prospectus Solution to do that. So it's having that flexibility built into the system. We can set up templates and accelerators to actually drive the process is really critical for making sure that the data migration step and the data transition step is successful. So it's that's part of it. The other part of it is, like Randy was saying, linking up to materials management, linking up to finance, linking up to HR. Many of our clients over the last 30 years, and I worked at SAP, so I can say this, the clients didn't implement SAP PM on ECC the right way 25, 30 years ago. They left it in silos. And so that's the reason why we have this disconnect. And so now it's with S4, we have the opportunity to correct all that, link all the integration components together through the hierarchy, choose a standard and implement it, define safety procedures, compliance issues, those things to the hierarchy and to the master data, so that in the work order, guys can receive the information they need to be alert and be aware of what's going on. Leveraging the equipment master and the hierarchy, the historical data files as well. SAP and non-SAP systems together is really what's critical for operations, because we've got so many non-SAP applications that are going to be used. They always say, well, how do we integrate this in? We go, well, it's your master data. We're going to figure out how to do that. We're going to set it up in master data with data objects. We're going to define that to the work order, and we're going to, align it to the processes. And so that's critically important as well. And I don't think people really appreciate the need for having common data object definitions and sharing that across the enterprise, as Randy was saying. It's finance, procurement, and operations have got to be on the same page. So this new digital capability works. That's we find that quite a bit. That's really a jumbled mess. So Mike can add to that too. He's
Mike, you've been into material master implementation and then differentiating it with spare part. Maybe that's something I would like to know from you.
Well, and that's the thing. So master data and even reference data is shared across the enterprise. So like Mark's talking here around, plant maintenance, EAM, IAM, and hey, we want to be able to go do this, and hey, but now I get into I need to go out and do my preventative maintenance or do a scheduled maintenance, and I'm going to need all these spare parts. Okay, who's responsible for procuring those? And then not all spare parts are the same. There's consumables, the nuts and bolts and the stuff that I have in inventory, but I'm not as worried about it. Then there's specialty parts. Oh, it's got to have such a shear percentage, or weight tolerance or whatever those pieces are. And then you get into the bigger one, like, okay, do I have these in inventory? Because this is a high cost volume item. Do I need to have an inventory? Do I need to have it as just in time? Do I only order it because it has such a long lead time? From like a utility perspective, I'm rebuilding a substation, and to bring in all those transformers. Some of those aren't small, and you can't go to Best Buy to pick one up. You have to go have them built, and the lead time might be 18, 24, 36 months to get a new one built. All of a sudden, this spare parts becomes like a bigger, like, who owns it? Where's it go? And this is why it's so critical up front to define what your data is, what the data model is, who's going to own those certain pieces, because they get shared across the enterprise, and everybody has a different aspect of what they want to go look at it. So the days where we just had, for lack of a better phrase, the plant maintenance people going out and doing their work, all of a sudden now I need input from finance, because they're going to want costing, and they're going to want to get into predictive for future capital projects. I need to get supply chain involved because they want to go on, be able to source and have the right stuff at the right period of time. EH&S, do I need to have all the right personal protective equipment? Is there any lead paint that there might have to, mitigate and all that? All of a sudden, this piece became much, much bigger than just, I came into work today, I got my work order, I picked up all my parts and went to go do it. It becomes a much bigger piece across the enterprise, and all these different business pieces come into play. This is why it becomes so critical, and why everybody says the data should be owned by the business. And that's a great statement, but now, is it true that I'm supply chain, I own materials? Nobody can do anything with materials without me. No, because supply chain only cares about this small piece on the material. Finance cares about this piece. Plant maintenance owns, or manufacturing owns about this piece. It's shared across the enterprise, and all of a sudden it becomes much more getting across and making sure everybody's aligned across the organization. So, like Mark said earlier, are we using the same terms interchangeably? And if Mark says master data, is that the same definition I have as master data? Mm-hmm. Or if he says it's a name template, so the same way I define the name template. And that's so critical, because then it feeds into like the MDO solution, because the business just wants to move. Yeah. So we also need to make it simple for them to be able to go execute.
I want to hit on one thing Mike just said about organization change too. This often drives organizational change. A lot of clients go back and say, well, it's the business's responsibility to manage the data. That doesn't work. IT's not going to carry it either. There's this gap that always gets thrown in between. IT's pointing at business is pointing at IT, and they both say, well, they're responsible for the data. That's got to be considered when you look at this transition. If you don't have good data management practice procedures set up, you really need to think about setting up an organization or as part of IT or as a separate unit. It's going to support the data integrity, the transition, the migration of data, the maintenance of data, et cetera, across your enterprise, because this is it's not we don't do this, we don't point it away and go, it's his fault. We hear that all the time, and it really needs to be taken on by the enterprise at a senior management level, where they actually say we need a chief data officer, or we need a VP of data services, because it's a key enabler for your success, and that's what's often left out of the discussion. So we go in and we talk about change management. We talk about putting these new solutions in place. That's a critical component organizational change wise, and we help our clients often create those roles and define it and set that organization up, because they don't have it today. So that's a great point Mike made a second ago.
I want to play off that a little bit, Mark. What I've actually found is it's not that they don't have it today. there's somebody in the organization doing these activities because we still get people. It's formalizing that and recognizing that. That's what we need to go do. Because every time you come in and all of a sudden the companies go, I'm going to need a data steward. I'm going to need all. I don't have this headcount. Yeah, you do. There's somebody here creating your data, changing your data. We just need to formalize what they do and document the process.
Yep.
I mean, it's not like we need to go hire, 1,000 new people. No, that's
No.
not what we're saying. We just need to organize them properly.
Well, we need to get the
Michael-
people to. Sorry, Randy, real quick, but
That's right.
Mike just brought up another point. With me. One of the clients had half of his engineering staff doing data format changes, and the other half was doing the actually reliability work. And he said it'd be great if I could get all my staff, all my engineers in reliability to just do reliability. But instead, we have data format issues, so we've got to take half my staff because nobody supports it in our organization. So half my staff is doing this data transition. It's just crazy.
Yeah.
Ready?
All I was going to say was I absolutely agree with you guys. The problem is enforcing it. You've got some guy out there doing it. He's
Yep.
busting his butt trying to do the right thing, and we don't enforce it. We don't set it as a initiative, as a priority for the company. And if we enforce that and we actually say, no, we're going to require you to do this rather than let Randy do it the way he's always done it at his plant and Ron John doing all the way at his plant, we'll actually see success. So it has to be an enterprise initiative. It has to be driven, in this case, from the very top. And if it's not going to be effective.
Yeah, and I think I've often, said that I always relate data to safety. Sometimes I know there are it's a cultural thing too, because even AI today, when we talk about AI, and it's not that you have a little AI project and or it's kind of a specific project. It's a change. It's a shift in the way the whole organization thinks, right from the people on the field to people in the back office. So I think in general, I feel safety, if you look at 20 years ago, even in asset intensive industry, it was still, they not there yet, but today it's very different because the culture has been not built across just a few people who are managing safety. It's across the organization, and I feel data is also something like that people can relate to that. How do you build that culture? How do you build that, the ownership and accountability like we have for safety? But that's really good. But that brings to a topic that we all talk about. We talk about predictive maintenance, and we have been talking about predictive maintenance for a long time, and also how sensors and IoTs are also playing a very important part now, with more automation and more more based on alerts and asset performance management systems coming in place now to really help in that process. I think the context of master data becomes much more important in that, and if you bring AI on top, it just changes the whole thing in terms of how you look at it. Maybe I'll start with you, Mark, and this whole and you've seen the evolution of many years of right from probably the forms and the paper to the technology.
Well, we were just talking about earlier. Before I was texting with one of our guys in the Middle East this morning, and he was saying AI's, they think that everything's going to be solved by AI. They're just going to drop AI in. It's automatically going to read it and automatically give them answers. So they don't think they need to dedicate any people to it. And I was just like, everybody thinks that AI is a silver bullet. Sorry, it's not. If you don't set it up right, like we're talking about with the foundation, AI is not going to work. I don't care what you do. Nobody's come up with a silver bullet AI application that's going to automatically read everything, automatically put the hierarchy together, automatically link it to all the applications, bill of materials that we've talked about so far in this call. It just doesn't happen. So we at Accenture are investing a lot of money to use AI and Gen AI applications with machine learning and business rules, and tying that to key applications that our clients want to use, like S4 ERP from SAP, like Prospecta, being able to enable that further with greater insight and ability to help transition and speed the process. But again, if you don't have clean data, bad data in is equal to bad data out. It doesn't work. And so no insights are going to be given. I mean, you can't hook up to Chat GPT and get it to answer questions for you on data. I'm sorry, it just doesn't work. I mean, Mike runs into that too. We were both tracking the investments. We're both trying to make sure our teams internally know that the importance of this, but at the same time, it's not a silver bullet. So,
Mike, you have your views on that? Do you want to add to that?
No, it's the same thing. So, from as we've seen the evolution, so we started out, where we did robotic process animation, then we got into machine learning, then we got into the initial Gen AI, now we're moving into agentic AI, but it's continuously training it. And if we don't train it and give it the right definitions, then it can't output what we're looking for. So no different if I go to ChatGPT, if I don't put in the right prompt, it's not going to give me the answer I'm looking for. So if I don't know how to ask for it, it doesn't know how to give it to me. And that's exactly and that still gets all back into the true data definition. Are we using the right phrases? Are we using commonly across? Because that then helps train it and gets it into. And will we get into where, yes, we can all sit back and, sip our lattes and, while the machines go off and do everything? Yeah. But are we going to have that in the next, 18 months and 5 years and 10 years? No, because we have to do a lot of work to train the thing. So,
yeah. Now, I think, and maybe Randy, I don't know if you want to add in that too, because
just to say, I think our jobs are all safe for a while. We're not going anywhere. Humans are not going anywhere. But I mean, at Perspective, we have Kai. We have AI, and we are building that. But it takes time, as everybody says. And when somebody out there is telling you that it's going to be the silver bullet that's going to cure everything tomorrow, I think all of us in the room would say you better be suspect to that. That's not the case. AI is a great technology, and it's going to take us places we never imagined, but it's not going to take us there tomorrow. So we just need to have proper expectations, manage our expectations of what's going to happen. Kai's going to be a great tool within MDO, for example, but it's going to take time. Kai's a baby right now, and so is all AI, and it's promising, really promising, but let's not be unrealistic.
Yes, like we came into a client. They wanted to help us do with data quality. And okay, everybody kind of knows, okay, I put together definitions. Hey, the name should always be capitalized. It should be the full legal name. Pretty straightforward activities. But then we ran it through our ML and AI because what it starts looking for is the patterns. And then it starts proposing rules back. And you give them back to the business, and the business said, that's not how I look at my data. Yes, but should you? And it started, thinking like, well, yeah, hey, even though these things, as you think about it, like on a material master, aren't necessarily connected, what the system came back is, hey, I've noticed every time you populated basic data, unit measure each, you had this buyer code. Should this become a rule? And, it started making the business rethink about their data. And that's what we need to get into, because all data is not unique, but there are associations in there that we natively just don't think of, because traditionally that's not been our point.
Yeah. And I think now other thing is also which brings to the whole collaboration on asset data has also now come to a different level. With SAP is also a business network asset collaboration side of things, and especially we being in the SAP space, we see that that's been now seen as also a very important area to collaborate. But it starts with the whole asset life cycle, from the operator to the to the owner and coming back into that makes sense. And one thing which comes very closely is that classification when you do collaboration, and in terms of everybody can classify their asset data in their own way, and what you have, the way you looked at the classification can be very different. Maybe Mark, how do you see this whole collaboration? Maybe with a question to you also in terms of asset collaboration. How do we harmonize that? Between different pieces of information coming into your enterprise.
Well, I think it goes back to what we were saying. SAP has a great collaboration engine, Business Network for Asset Collaboration, and it's been out there the longest, actually, 15 years. I worked on it back then when it started, and it was really built for to enable collaboration with equipment suppliers. So it's been sold some, but I wouldn't say a great amount. And unfortunately, that's the word collaboration to most of our clients, from a design manufacturing, supplier manufacturer standpoint, they're used to transmittals, emails, text, fax machine, that kind of stuff. The old technologies still dominate a lot of the collaboration. Unfortunately, I think we're seeing some emerge now with the change in newer employees coming in who are expecting to use more of these tools. But the collaboration engine within the BNAC is very powerful, and you can set up separate rooms to allow suppliers to populate data into your master data structure. If you use the right standards, you have it standardized, as we've mentioned, across the enterprise, and so that information can be shared and then updated. And this means if a compressor changes from a manufacturer standpoint, the documentation for it changes, the updates will be sent to their customers automatically, and then it isn't automatically loaded in there. But basically, what you do is you receive an email or a text, a notification that says, "Hey, I've changed the information on this compressor. Take a look at it before you actually populate it into your master data structure." That's a very good use of the tool. So we were discussing that with a lot of clients in this process of transition, making them aware of this capability. And a lot of them are going, "That's different. We haven't ever used that. How do we change? How do we put that process in place? What new roles are required?" So we call it a data administrator role is required. So that introduces a change again in their structure, but being able to track that across multiple partners in your ecosystem is exactly why this was designed. It's meant to enable key collaboration partners who are building equipment for you to be able to access your data or push data into your structure, so that your data always then stays up to date. And that's something that a lot of clients have never really thought about. And so that's a whole new thing for them. We've been able to demonstrate it and show it with our data that we have, but it's a process that a lot of maintenance and operations companies, personnel and companies, need to consider, because you can figure, there's 5 to 8 million parts in a refinery. Okay, how do we keep up to date with all that data? So it's all your partners in the ecosystem are, they're changing the data. So it's, how can I make that easier on myself and not have to be a manual load every single time? That collaboration component enables you to do that. So that's what we encourage. And I think that's something we're going to see more of as technology enables these capabilities. We all have digital technology in our hand, with our mobile phone, with iPads, with desktops. We got all kinds of technology, but we need to make sure we're taking advantage of it smartly. And that's what we try and encourage our clients to do, is take advantage of these things to your benefit, train your people on how to use it, enable it with digital backbone, as Randy was talking about. Make sure it all lines up. We spend a ton of time doing that, and it's critical for the future, because guess what? AI applications are not going to get less complex; they're going to get more complex. So we're going to start applying more and more technology and intelligence to the overall processes to really enable those processes to work, so you can get to the answer faster, and we can actually see productivity improvements with workers and processes through master data.
Michael, what's your thoughts? I think it's definitely an area that master data is changing with collaboration. I think that
it is. And actually, I had a client where we talked through, they had, and we'll give the example of grease. So for whatever reason, they set the material up of grease to go into a grease gun as a unit of measure of case, because that was their smallest, because that's how they bought it. But within that case, there are tubes of grease, and are those tubes 2 ounces, 5 ounces, 24 ounces? Having that conversation about how the supplier just even packed it. And then, getting into, okay, when should I set that up as a new material versus just make the change on the existing material? So all of a sudden, if the unit of measure went from, hey, there were 6 5-ounce tubes and now there's 12 2-ounce tubes, is that a new material, or is I just need to update? And having those conversations both with, in that time, our client, to go back to their supplier to get into, because nobody wants to, and like Mark's earlier example, I don't want half my staff updating data. I should be able to have that fed in. I should be able to have clear ideas of what's going on. We should try to, automate as much as possible, but it's getting all those upfront agreements to have that automation occur. Otherwise, then becomes highly manual. And unfortunately, data, we're like one of the last areas anybody wants to do, because everybody's incentivized to either fix it, get boxes out the door, whatever it is, not to correct the pieces, that drive it. So,
Randy, how about you?
Yeah. I think back to the days when I was really doing a lot of project consulting. And one of the things that I hated to hear and we heard so much was, that won't work for us. We can't do that. We're different. We're different. And we need to, especially now with all the collaboration with stuff like BNAC that we're doing, we really need to look to how can we follow the industry standards? How can we use the industry taxonomies? How can we do those things so that we are actually being able to interact now and use those collaboration solutions like BNAC, and be able to actually do that. We have to begin to realize that it's a big world now that's very interconnected, and we have a lot of solutions and a lot of tools that we can use, but we have to get out of the mindset that we're different. We're the only one that can't use this. You can.
And I think that's a good point, and that's where I feel that, from my perspective, also, I see the whole collaboration piece will only get more. It'll have more deeper relationships. I'm sure the data, would actually expand quite a bit. What the people know, right? Because a lot of companies that I go and they talk about digital twin, but really, digital twin can only work if your data is consistent across. And I think collaboration will help in that area quite a bit. Which one thing which probably is a good topic to discuss, that maybe is the whole digital transformation that's happening, and S4, and moving to SAP S4, or any other transformation that's happening in customers now. And I see a lot of these transformations happening in a much more way that you push the data, or migrate the data, and I think that's an excellent opportunity for our customers to see, okay, can we do something here? Can we use this time and effort to, I don't know, prepare our data, or we call it the readiness. We call about system readiness, code readiness, and data readiness. I feel it's not about tables and fields. It's much more than that. So I think, Michael, in Europe, the cost of having bad quality data, and really I'm talking about now, because a lot of these master data projects get stuck because of what's the ROI, what will you get out of this, and why do we need to clean our data? We've been running like this for ages. So how do you see the cost of bad quality data really in general, not only in transformation but overall, and in terms of visibility, in terms of
so it's not so much on the transformation, because everybody sees it, the transformation. Oh my gosh, we can't go live because customers, it is the run state. And somebody made a decision at some time, and best decision probably at that point in time, but it was wrong for the long term. I didn't take the time to actually do it right. I wanted to get boxes out the door. I did this tweak, and now all of a sudden I put other automation or batch jobs or other pieces on top of it that keep now reading this poor data. And so, like the example I had earlier, this was actually a utility client of mine. They didn't keep up and have the right motors. And so they kept sending crews out with the wrong materials. That has a huge cost. I'm sending a crew with windshield time to get to a site to go do a repair job, and they have the wrong parts because I never updated that I swapped out that motor from a Mitsubishi to a General Motors. And I have the wrong pieces. That's huge. But that is, easily measurable. But the rest of the stuff, you come down to the crews, and I call it the Joe Knows. Oh, we got this work order came out, but hey, it says you're going to need 5 tubes, but you really only need 2. Or hey, it says you need 5, but you're really going to need 50 because it's out in the wind-blown area and just gets dry like no tomorrow. Mm-hmm. But it's only from the experienced people that have done it, and they've never taken time to put it into the system to where then we can automate it. And all those little costs add up to big cost. And unfortunately, as we run businesses, we kind of trip over the little cost to save the big cost. But if I take care of the little cost, it kind of takes care of the big cost by itself. So, I was on my college board. We needed to rewire a building. It's not pretty. You're not going to get a donor to give you, tens of millions of dollars to go rewire it, but it needs to be done. And finding that one unique person that's not worried about having their name put on it, but I need $10 million to go rewire the building because that's what data is. Data is the wiring. It runs it, like you said, it's the framing. It's not pretty. You're not gonna, be recognized and have front page taken out about doing this activity, but it runs everything.
Right. And I think that's and I think I'm sure similarly you've seen a lot of these ROI and cost justifications on the name of data and how you see that. Maybe with your experience, do you see that changing? Do you see organizations in these um, in these in these massive projects are looking at that in a different way?
They
Yeah, I
are
think
starting to, and it's really because of the rise of the analytics side. And I want to be able to go do this. You back that truck up to the data side. So
Yeah.
I agree 100%. Yeah, data is a huge factor in every single project we get into. We go into great lengths and detail to have discussions like this with clients. We talk about it from a process standpoint on specific capabilities and functions they want to run within EAM or within procurement materials management. But then we also have cross-functional discussions, and we force those groups to talk to each other, finance, procurement, EAM, all together in our projects, because it's important to share that understanding and define it and agree on the fact that this is going to be the data source, the one data source or the two data sources they have put in there that we can make work, because they have so many redundant sources. They've got silos of applications. They've got what I'll say little kingdoms where they've been built up and data has been the power key for them for a long time. And it's basically leveraging Power BI or spreadsheets to drive the process. And that doesn't work with the digital processes we're talking about. So it's getting them to kind of back up, understand the bigger picture, work together to drive towards things like Mike was talking about. I mean, you can enable key analytics or scorecarding, or to really drive, or even I'll say investment portfolio management, without having the right data, the right source, aggregating, and then actually staying clean through the process. It just doesn't work. So it's a huge factor that we never avoid it, because we want to enable the capabilities to work. So it's always a key requirement on the front end we discuss. And lots of times, like Mike said, the people that the clients don't want to focus there, because they say, "Oh, we got this data. We've solved that a long time ago." No, you haven't. It doesn't work, right? So you're limiting your options by saying that you're stuck with this one data structure you built 20 years ago. It doesn't work. And it's just not. That's not very very productive, I guess is what I'd say. So.
Yeah, and I think that brings to a very important thing, especially in the asset space, is compliance. Because we are seeing more and more regulatory compliance. You have the ESG reporting getting more tighter. You got the scope emissions. Depending which country we are, but it is getting tighter. And but in general, and I'll probably say a little bit of. I was with a customer, and he's very passionate about his data, and he did say that there was a big safety incident because of a data issue, because in terms of how they were doing inspections, because they just trusted what came on the mobile solution, and actually made the changes that he needs to make during that inspection round. Um, but uh, um, but in general, if you see today, a lot of the next gen or whatever as people are moving away from organization retiring, that experience, understanding the data and how much they trust mobile solutions and how much they trust um, that is presented to them is much more. The trust on data on today's generation is much more higher, than what was before, because they had an experience to say, no, that doesn't look right, and so having that in mind, I think safety and compliance becomes very critical in terms of getting the data right now. Because if you are going to do a lot of automation on the front of the business and give this new generation of people coming into workplace with those tools in hand, they better have the right data. That's my thought. But interestingly here, maybe also again, Mark, from you, how do you see that? How do you see compliance safety now? People are, because I feel that's something very critical right now.
Well, it is. It's critically important, especially when you get into asset-intensive industries where operations are, intense. You have safety factors that are important to include in the process. And I had one client that had hired like 15 new engineers, and so the other 15 that are older guys were all retiring. So they replaced these, older guys retiring with the new engineers. Well, they didn't know the background, and they didn't know the backdrop, and they tend to trust the data too much because they really didn't have the background experience to actually calculate what's necessary from a change standpoint. If pressure points on a pressure vessel needs to be changed or something like that happens. I always encourage my son, who's an engineer too. What happens if your phone breaks? What happens if your calculator breaks? You got to know the processes behind this, and you got to have clean data to make decisions. And long story short, the client that hired the new engineers, they kept losing them because the engineers didn't understand how to do the manual processes in the plant. So you've got to have this interchange between data, insights, process functions that are expected to be executed, tied together with data. And so it's knowing how to get to the end result and then knowing what you should be seeing as well. Big factor. I mean, so education and training is huge in the operations world. Knowing that a data range or a data output from a calculation or from a iPhone or whatever you're using to get that derive that data, the data is clean and actually it is within the range of operating threshold I'm expecting to see. Huge. That's huge. And so if these guys don't know that off the top of their head, then and the training wasn't very good, then you're going to lose people. And so that's why they lost other people and had to bring back all the retirees to do the work because the younger guys just lost patience with the process. So because this company had not bothered to invest in technology over the last 20 years, most of their stuff ran on manual clipboards, and so it was really an education and process, seeing the next generation guys coming to work and not having the technology foundation to work from, which Mike and we all been talking about in this webinar this whole time. It's critically important, and it affects every facet of your business, especially in asset intensive industries. We can't overemphasize the need for safety and compliance and visibility enablement to drive decisions so that these accidents don't occur. So,
Michael, your views on that, on safety and compliance, especially that you're seeing how businesses are looking at it in data.
Well, it gets back to how I say it's all tied together. So even though like SAP has the EH&S module, but it's a different module, so that's mentally, oh, it's a different group, but they're driven by attributes off the data that IAM provides them. And if we haven't taken the time to put it in there, then it's hard to go track it over there. And then, like Mark said, asset heavy industries also tend to have some older equipment. And so now, do I have all the pipes wrapping asbestos? And so now we all know asbestos is bad, but if I go work on it and it's not listed, do I need to have the right respirator and the eye protection, the hand protection, and all that? Because it's not going to hit me on day one or day two. It's going to hit me farther down the line. And so there's a longer tail on a lot of these things. We used to think of safety more of, did I fall off the ladder, and break my arm? Now there's, agents, chemicals and all that might have a longer lead time that I got exposed to that I may or may not know about it now. We continuously learn about different pieces. It's making sure all those are tracked to where then our friends from EH&S can do their piece.
So Randy, what is, I know you've been hearing that constantly, maybe something that you've been on field a lot, and safety has been a big area because you've actually worked on the field quite a bit.
Yep, absolutely safety. But you know me, Ron John, I'm all about the business. So I'm going to turn it a little bit and talk about critical spares and that type of thing, because I can tell you I was at a location, one of a client location, and we were talking about different parts of the data, and I asked about critical spares. And the guy said, oh, we use Bill for that. And I was like, okay, I'm a really smart guy. I know all these acronyms. What's Bill? What's Bill? And I keep going through it. Okay, we use Bill for that. And I'm trying to figure out that acronym. And I finally said to him, I don't understand what's Bill. And he said, oh, Bill. It's that old guy over yonder. And I said, tribal knowledge. So what we're using is tribal knowledge. And as Mark and Mike have both said, that's great until they begin to get the gray hair like me, and they're slowly moving out. How are we going to replace that? And if we don't have the technology, and we don't today with the turnaround, you really have to have that basis in that technology, because if you don't, it's going to be lost knowledge, and it's going to be a safety issue. Whether it's a safety issue today, it's going to be a safety issue soon.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I think maybe one thing which I would like to bring in to solve all this, we talk about tools, we talk about processes, we talk about consulting, we talk about how do we approach this to get started off the ground, and a lot of people struggle to start a program like this. Who owns it, who will actually run it, and I think from, you've done it a lot, especially from Accenture's perspective. I'm sure that comes a question: process or tool or both together. And sometimes I've seen people take extreme of, let's establish a process, don't worry about the tool. It's like, let's establish everything in ERP and then implement SAP. Well, sometimes you learn from the tool and the process together. And I think because something is implemented in many places and it has worked, it is something that you try to leverage and not try to, reinvent everything. I think what would your suggestion be, Mark, to really to businesses out there, to really how do they approach it, and how do they start something like this to
Well, I mean, they can do their own assessment, or they can hire someone like us to do it. We working with you guys, we come in and do an assessment from a maturity standpoint and say, okay, here's what we're looking for in data elements, and we help you identify, which data sources look the best. We also run tests to do that and have some ideas about it from experience standpoint. But that's generally what I would suggest. And lots of times we do have clients who do their own analysis, which is good because they're looking across the enterprise and seeing all these silos of data. And so it's important to have a process, stick to it, be able to drive some decision making. That means defining your business requirements and criteria on the front end, so you can do a fair evaluation. That's generally what happens, and so we and where we've done this before with you guys, it's been pretty successful. So,
Michael, and do you have any ideas of how the business can approach this a bit more and take?
So from the governance side, it's three: people, process, and technology. And like we talked about a little bit earlier, there are people in organizations that are doing governance today. They don't have a formal role, and they probably don't have a formal process. Getting those documented, and then doing the right tool selection. And the tools need to go hand in hand. I don't want to pick a tool and then customize the heck out of it to fit my process, because that leads to long-term technical debt, which means I'm going to be back probably in the same boat, which I'm not going to be able to leverage newer technologies to come forward. But I also need to make sure that I'm not picking just to fit my process. Yes, there will be some unique differentiators for each industry, some value differentiators, or where they're innovative, or where they're leading, that they're different. But like Mark said, they shouldn't be able to say, we don't do that, or I can't do that. We want to make sure, because all the tools are coming out, and MDO is becoming a perfect example. They're getting smarter in how to adapt to what the business needs. They have much better user interfaces, becoming much more UI user friendly and intuitive, which then helps with that whole change management curve, which is really what we need to drive to get everybody in. We can't just come into them with a 250-page manual going, here's how you guys are going to update your data today. We need to be able to, Amazon, Google get on your phone. Hey guys, just go fill in these 5 fields, and then we can derive the values for other things. And then we'll have a specialist, a data steward, go through and make sure it's all right with everything else to keep going. Because I really want you to go fix the equipment. I don't want you to become a data specialist.
So, Ron John, I think we have 1 minute, so I'm going to keep mine to 2 words: call perspective.
Yeah, no, I think this has been great, and I think it's all about bringing the whole power of the right people doing the consulting side is very important. The change is very important, and the tool is equally important to make sure that all come together. I think Perspective Accenture have been thanks for being our partner for so many years, and being together and really helping us implement great solutions, and helping our customers. At the end of the day, we are trying to all make sure to make their life better. Thank you, everybody. Thanks for your time.
Everyone.
Thank you,
Appreciate it.
everybody.
Thank you.